welcome to the AtoZrunning podcast, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andy.
And I am Zach, and up next, determining what running by effort should look like and why we so easily get it wrong. And after that, World of Running updates about new world record on the track and youngsters flying and more. Oh my stars, we are so excited to be reporting running news today.
Yeah.
So excited.
Super excited.
You're gonna love it. It's just gonna be wonderful times. But before we do that, we've got some other things to talk about too, and all of it's gonna be good and wonderful. But most good and wonderful of everything we do is when we interact with you, especially when you ask questions and we can share some thoughts on air at the end of the month. And we'll do that every month as long as you go to atozrunning.com/question and share your thoughts so we can respond.
We like to do so. All of your questions that you have. And then, of course, like Zach said, we like to connect with you. And we did so at Bayshore. And Zach actually has some updates about Bayshore.
Oh, yeah. So you recall that we shared a little bit of our own experiences. And included in that reflection was the fact that Bayshore had sanctioned the race to be a qualifying event for USA Track and Field, meaning you can use it to qualify for the Olympic trials, you can set records on the course, all that kind of stuff. Well, we did a little bit of background research to get a sense of just how valuable is that for a race to do that, and just how common or not is it? And here is what we found. This is incredible. So there are currently 126 men and 106 women qualified for the U.S. Marathon Trials for 2024 via the marathon. There's more qualifiers via half marathon, but there are that many in the marathon. At the moment that I'm saying this, it could be updated any second, and then there might be more. But as we speak, 126 men, 106 women. Now, that being the case, they also list where these individuals ran their qualifying events. So I did a little bit of data mining and found out that of all the events for the men, there are 22 different events from which individuals are qualifying if you take out the World Championships. That doesn't count because the World Championships is not a common marathon course. You only run it one time at the championships. So anyway, taking that out, there are 22 men events and 23 women events globally that U.S. runners have used to qualify for this coming Olympic trials. So that's not a lot, right? I mean, Bayshore is one of them, one of 22 or 23 events. That's crazy. But it gets more crazy because in the United States, if we take out any event that is outside the United States, then we are down to just 14 for both the men and the women. They're not necessarily the same 14, but 14 events that men have used to qualify and 14 events that women have used to qualify, which tells us that Bayshore is in fact one of only 14 events in the United States that is sanctioned and has produced qualifiers. What?
That's crazy.
And they're in West Michigan, being the only race in Michigan that's sanctioned, which is another stat there. However, it gets even better. I have one more layer here, and here is what happens. In Bayshore, there were 2 men who qualified in a single race. And of the list of 126 men who have qualified, only 7 events, including Bayshore, have more than 1 qualifiers from the event. So Bayshore is one of only 7 events in the United States, period, that has had more than 1 person qualify in the same race.
Do you remember how many were CIM? It was a lot.
Almost half. So the California International Marathon is notorious for being super fast because it's a downhill course that's point to point. I still don't understand how.
Not notorious, famous, because notorious would be negative.
Right, but it's notorious because it seems like that wouldn't be a records legal course because it's downhill point to point. But something about the exactness there anyway, so it's legal. And as such, runners are constantly using that to qualify because there's not very many courses in the world that are faster. And so on the women's side, it's 49 of 106 from just that one event.
Wow. It's
at
also
the same
height,
race.
Too.
By the way, they were all in the same race. So it was the same year.
Yeah.
49 qualified at the same time on the same day.
That's cool.
Yeah. It's cool. It's an exciting event. We have never done it, but some of you probably have.
There are some exciting events if you live in West Michigan that you can participate in that are coming up rather quickly.
Indeed. We've got on June 10th a fun opportunity to race on the track, especially for those of us who really like to, but there's not a lot of opportunity to run track races when you're not like in high school or college or something. And so at Grand Valley State University in Allendale, Michigan is the GVSU Redemption Meet. You can find out all about it at directathletics.com. And that meet itself has a bit of a reputation. This is its second year running, so it's relatively new. But in its first year, you had the girls' high school 1,600 meter national record, which, by the way, we're going to report a little bit on that individual here coming up soon as well. Addie Wiley is on the prowl doing crazy things. And among that, you've got kids running. You've got adults who have never run on the track before running. Like, everything is happening, and it's really cool. So go ahead and find more information at directathletics.com or jump on AtoZrunning.com for this episode, and you'll find a direct link to it.
So that event could be for the whole family. Also, LPGA 5K can be for the whole family, at least for breakfast.
Yeah. The next week.
The very next week on June 17th at Rockford High School, my alma mater, there is the LPGA 5K Meyer gift cards for the top 3 in each age group.
And we're not just talking about like $10 gift, $500 gift card for the first person in each age group. 500. And then it's like 300 and 100 or something for the next two. So lots of gift cards for lots of people. It's loads of fun. That's always cool.
There's another great event on that day too. It's the Light Point 5K, which is down in Grand Rapids. So that's another cool fast course.
Indeed. So there's lots of fun opportunities to run. You know, can you do LPGA and Light Point?
Ooh.
Is there enough time to like run one and then the other?
I don't know.
Huh. It's not that long
you
of a
thinking
drive.
about
I might be. But anyway, so these are good and fun experiences. If you're in West Michigan around the coming weeks, there's just lots of opportunities for incredible things. But we've got a lot of other incredible things to tell you about soon. So we should probably just get right to it. Well, our topic today is possibly the result of a little bit of a chip on Zach's shoulder.
What?
Because as I'm talking with runners so often, I'm constantly having this like vague sense of there's something that when I try to talk about it, it doesn't come across quite the right way. And I've had a really hard time putting my finger on it until just recently. And so this topic came, I guess you could say, out of my need to be more clear about a thing.
That's good. Being clear is good.
Sure, it is that. Also, though, and more specifically, I think it will be helpful in terms of understanding the approach that we recommend in training in a broad sense, and also kind of clues into some of the things that we've talked about from our own athletes and our own experiences in some of these recent times, including, in fact, the Bayshore report. And some dots connect, because I got a question today, in fact, whatever day you're listening to this, I don't know what it is, but the day I'm saying this, I got a question from a friend. He texted me after the Bayshore stuff, and he's like, congrats, nice work on that. That was really great. And my reply to him started a fascinating back and forth. And so we're going to talk about that in a moment, because it's a piece of the puzzle. But what it is, the topic here now, is this concept of running by effort, training or racing or otherwise by effort, has a nuance to it that goes one of two ways. And one, I think, is counterproductive. And the other is more preferable. So this is the difference. We talk about things like running by feel and running by effort and assume those are the same thing. But I'm going to make the case that they are not. And running by effort, if we were to use a different word to just have another way of saying it, we might say something more like running by exertion, like how much I'm trying might be one way to think about it. Where running by feel is itself reactionary, or more on the opposite side of like I do something and then I see how I feel about it, or from it, I should say. So that's kind of that's the basic. It's very precise. People are hearing this right now and they're like, really? You're going to try to articulate to me how those are different? I don't get it. Well, we have some examples that might help.
So there's some common questions we get. For instance, my long run felt really easy for the first hour and then I just started feeling really bad. Or like steady state run, I was just clipping along doing steady state and then I just, I cut it short because I just started not feeling great for a bit there.
So it's like the one there is always like, well, I felt so good at first and then I didn't anymore. And I couldn't keep it up.
And that's the same as the last one. In a race, like I felt good until mile whatever. It could be like halfway or 18 miles or something like that. So typically it's because we run excited by feel early and we're not feeling badly yet, which we shouldn't, right? So it's a nuance here that we want to be able to harness in order to be able to appropriately give the proper effort, exertion, as Zach says, when it comes to navigating our workouts and our races.
Andy, do you remember some time ago when you and I were discussing on air a topic that we ended up arguing about, and you were totally in the right and I was totally not seeing it at the time? So this is when I'll say you were right.
Oh, thank you.
And so what it was, do you remember this? We were talking about the idea of like, as you fatigue, that your effort, so
your effort increases.
Can you remind me what it is that you said that I disagreed with?
Well, I had said that your effort increases as you run, and you said that there's like, you give an effort. Like there is an effort and it's the same. And I said, no, you start out feeling feeling.
You're
okay,
not.
I'm using the
you're
word
not
feeling.
giving. But you're not giving as much effort
initially. You're not giving as much exertion early on, but you do end up increasing exertion
as you
tire, as you fatigue.
Yeah, and I was like, no, it's the same the whole time, because if it's an easy effort, it's an easy effort the whole time. And I was just having the hardest time. I still don't understand exactly why I have a hard time grappling with this in my head. It just doesn't click quite right. But you are totally correct.
Thank you.
Oh, yes.
This is a big
You heard
yes.
it, folks. You heard it. Zach is not incapable of admitting he was wrong, just highly unlikely he will ever admit he's wrong. But I am wrong far more often than I care to admit. So in this instance, the point that we were trying to make in that previous discussion was this idea of, as you run in any given range of effort, whatever it may be, as you run, your initial degree of exertion should be less than your later degree of exertion relative to your fatigue as you tire. So initially, you don't want to be trying the same % of maximum possible effort in that moment as you are later on, because you have far more energy available to you initially, far more maximum potential available to you, one could say. So the idea gets a little bit skewed as we start to think about, like, how should I feel in all these times? Because the feel is the feedback. And granted, we're trying to separate the two right now. How I feel is feedback about how hard I'm running, right? So I want to figure out how to exert myself adequately and appropriately before I feel a certain way. So I know that I'm pushing as much as I need to or should without necessarily feeling it yet. And the reason for that is because in training, we never feel the results of our effort right away. We just don't. And unless you're like a full dead sprint, right? You feel the results of that effort within moments. But ultimately, this is why it's so difficult. And this is why runners will so often say to us, I'm trying to run easy, and it feels really easy until it doesn't. And I can't finish the whole duration at that effort, but I can't run any slower because I'm running very easy in the beginning. Well, there's a couple answers to that. Either you progressively slow down as you fatigue, so you just keep that same degree of exertion the whole time, and as you're fatiguing, that exertion results in less performance, right? Am I getting this right, Andy? So if I try the exact same amount of effort the whole time I'm running, and I run long enough to fatigue me at that effort, then I'm going to slow down because I'm not giving any more effort, but I'm gaining more fatigue.
Which runners hate to do,
oh yeah,
by the way. But if we're looking at what we are needing from our training, we don't want to hold on with stubbornness and pride if we're in an easy day run and we do need to slow down to have it be the appropriate measure of effort for that day.
If that's
and so of course that's not ideal when it comes to racing and harder efforts, but like, we're looking at what the stimulus is doing for our bodies. Our bodies don't care what our pace is. So when it comes to making adaptations, we need to give the appropriate effort to get the right thing back from our training.
Oh, that's good. Write it. Write it somewhere. Okay, so yes. And then in that sense, that's one option, but that's the least or less desirable of the two options, is to slow down as you go to make sure that you're keeping the effort within that tolerable range. So instead, the alternative is to start easier than the tolerable range in terms of amount of exertion so that you can maintain that amount of exertion as your fatigue mounts. So in that spirit, that's where we start to talk about what does it look like to train by effort? What does it look like to race by effort? And how do we achieve that goal? So you ready for this conversation with my friend?
Oh, sure. I was like, are you talking about me? No, we're talking about a different conversation.
This is the one that I was just mentioning earlier. This conversation with my friend.
I'd love to hear it.
Via text. Okay, so he texted me and he says, great job. Congrats. Where's my phone? I should just pull it up and it's not nearby. Okay, so and he says this and I reply back, thank you. It was very exciting and quite surprising. Okay, that's how I answered him. And he texts me back and he's like, surprising? How is a race result surprising? Like, don't you know what you're capable of? Like, he's criticizing me. Now, granted, he's a friend in two capacities here. One, he's done this. Like, literally, the same thing that I just did, performance-wise. He's done that. He's been there. He knows exactly how to accomplish the same thing. And so, in his mind, it's like, I know what you're going through. I've been there. So, he's speaking out of a direct familiarity with the principle of what I just mentioned. Also, he has some knowledge of my eccentricities when it comes to these things too. And so he says to me, he's like, how is that even possible to be surprised by a result? And I'm like, okay, all right. Well, two things here. Two things went into this. The first was I never looked at my watch until mile 24. So I literally had no idea what kind of performance I was running. Granted, I knew that I was beating other people. And so I was running fairly well relative to the other people in the race, but I had no idea whether they were running well for their own purposes. You know, if they were, then I knew that I was in a good spot, but if they weren't, then who knows what kind of time I was running. So there's that, but also the last time I ran a marathon was a year ago, and I felt quite a bit worse in the later stages of that race and was running a fair bit slower. So part of me is like, you know, my recent relative comparison is like, it's not telling me anything naturally about that. And then the other side of it is in training, I do not train in such a way where I'm trying to glean insight from the data. Like I don't look at the result of a training run and say, okay, this looks like I'm in about this kind of shape, or that I just don't do that. And there's a couple of reasons why. One is because I don't know that I care that much anymore, whether my training tells me I'm capable of some thing or another in fitness wise. But also I don't think that information is true in a reliable sense. And so this goes into kind of what we're talking about here. And this is then how I articulated to this friend in my race approach. Okay. I was just going to say, I'm another example that if you were to look at my training, you might not necessarily think that I'm able to do what I do in races. That's true. So that's because you're training well. I just am saying I'm another example of that. Barry McGee says almost every time he emails me, it's one of his like constant reminders. Don't race your training. Do not race your training. You should not be testing yourself in that capacity in your training. Is his mindset in a general sense. So anyway, we don't in that sense glean that kind of information. And now it brings us to then the point here of the connection to the topic, which is then in race execution, the other side of that is I'm not looking at a watch at any point in time. Well, I was looking at distance because that was when I was deciding when to take fluids. Every 2 miles, I was going to take fluids. And so I wanted to watch distance just to keep that precise because I have a knack for not taking enough fluids early on in races. So as it goes, I'm running this race, but I'm doing it on the principle we're trying to describe here, which is I know that in a marathon, if you feel good in the beginning, that does not mean you're running easy enough because it's long and you're going to fatigue a lot. And so part of this is I have to understand how hard can I push in the early stages to have enough energy left to still be strong in the latter stages. And that's one sense of how we train in general. We teach ourselves to understand how much I can exert relative to the amount of energy available to me, relative to the distance of the race, and relative to the feedback I'm getting about how I'm feeling as well. That is a factor, but it's not the deciding factor. So this is where we get into then in a marathon, the first half of the marathon, if you're feeling badly, it's not because, well, if you're trained well and you're feeling badly in the first half, it's not because you're like overdoing it, unless you're so dramatically overdoing it that you're just really going a little outside the box there with too much effort. Otherwise, the first half is going to feel reasonably easy in terms of like exertionally. But that doesn't mean I'm running easy enough. So I still have to understand that I can only exert so much to have what I need later on, right? So that's what I'm articulating to this friend. That's kind of how I ran the race. I had no interest in following what time I was running, because all that time would do is give me some kind of expectation, good, bad, or otherwise, that I didn't want influencing my decision making. My decision making had to be all about how much can I exert right now relative to how much energy I have left and how much race is left to run. Okay, so that's why I don't look at a watch. Now, I recommend that to other runners, and understanding that very few other runners that we talk to do it quite to the extreme as I just articulated, where ideally I would actually never look at the watch. The only reason I did, in fact, in this instance is because I caught the lead runner at mile 24. That's when I finally caught up to him. And at that point I was thinking, okay, if I'm close to the time, then I need to do all that is possible under the sun to go for it, right? And if I'm not close to the time, it'd be good to know that, because I might just try to race the guy at this point and not like keep pushing as hard as I possibly can, because you never know when you're going to fall apart. So I checked my watch at mile 24 and realized we were going to do it. We were going to hit that time as long as we don't fall apart. So that was helpful in terms of contextualizing what I was going to decide. Aside from that, okay, go back to now the principle that we're trying to articulate here, which is, how do I know how much to exert at different stages in a run? And the only way to know that is through some amount of trial and error in training, which is why it's so important to train that way, so that come race time, I can do that effectively. Mm-hmm. Granted, I'm probably not going to do it perfectly every time. I am a testament to that fact, given that I've only ever done one marathon where I felt like I actually successfully did that. However, I've gotten a lot better at it in half marathons. Matter of fact, I think I can do it almost consistently in half marathons now, but not so much in very many other distances yet. So we're working on it, right? So here's how you do this then. You look at something like your easy runs, okay? Start with your long runs, because that tends to be the one where this happens the most. And I have to run easy enough in the first half that the second half still feels easy, right? So the feel is my feedback. It's going to tell me that I'm doing what I need to do, but my exertion is what I'm measuring. So in a long run, because it's the longest of my easy runs, it probably has to be the slowest as well. This is the principle that seems to frustrate so many people. It's like, why should I be running my long runs even slower than other things? Well, in certain stages and periods of training, if you didn't hear our series on training periods, go back and listen to it. It was really good, if we do say so ourselves. But the training period defines whether or not I should be running long runs easy or otherwise. And so if I'm in a period where I should be, which is most of the training cycle for most runners, then it should be the slowest run, simply by the nature of, in order to still be within a good, easy effort by the end, I have to be slow enough, easier in the beginning, so that as I fatigue, it still is an easy effort, exertion. Mm-hmm. Okay. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I give the opposite?
Yes.
Okay. So steady state runs have really helped me hone in effort for long distance running. And it's because I sometimes relax into a run and I don't keep a press and I don't keep my exertion, even though it's well within my capabilities. So the steady state run helps me hone in on just pressing that right amount and keeping my focus, because there are lots of components to being able to give the proper exertion, and one of them is focus. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's multifaceted. There's a physiological part, but there's also the ability to cognitively stay engaged in what you're doing. Mm-hmm.
It is in fact the case that we're training a few things at once as we're pursuing this kind of a goal in our training. I can appreciate the thought and how steady states play a role in that, but we'll come back to that. To your point, Andy, about like some of the problem is potentially exerting too little, so that you end up finishing the run feeling like I wasn't really working as hard as I probably should have been for that run. And what tends to happen there is I have to find how much more should I try to exert next time, and that little bit of trial and error piece of it. But it's also imperative for all of us to understand that efforts are ranges. It's not a single area. This is another reason why we do not use pace, because pace is silly.
Oh, goodness.
For training. But because pace is not a thing that's the same every day all the time. So an effort range tells me that some days I can be in the higher end of that range, some days in the lower end of that range, or in a given run, and this is where we come into like I start a little bit easier and end a little bit harder in terms of my amount of exertion, but I can still be within the same range either way. Sometimes I might start even a little bit easier, so I'm outside the range, and ease into the range. That certainly is understandable, but it is a range. And it's always going to be that. Even as you get into like higher levels of effort where the range gets a little bit narrower, it's really still fundamentally, I just want to be able to start easy enough that I can finish feeling like I'm giving the same kind of effort that I should be, so that it doesn't exceed the desired range, right? So that's where we get Arthur Lydiard's advice. And so he did this, 50 years ago, well, 65 years ago. Lydiard was advising more runners than just his own on some of these things, and he devised a strategy. And this is not unique; everyone understands the principle here, but he may have been one of the first ones to do it. Primarily, the steady state run is like one of the most essential training components to all of these concepts and helping put them together. That's one of the reasons why you do so many of them.
Conditioning, woo!
Conditioning, it's doing everything. It's good aerobic work for you. It's helping fine tune your intuition as you're running, and it's helping you dial in your focus, all this good stuff in one single workout. And you do it once or twice a week, every week for months on end. Anyway, so here's what Lydiard said. He would have his athletes do a kind of trial, and it was always initially to set the kind of current expectation, and then they would come back to it every once in a while. And what it was is you'd have an out and back course that was reasonably flat, like you're not going totally uphill one way and then totally downhill the other way. So consistent between the out and the back was the thought. And then you would go 30 minutes out and 30 minutes back, and your goal was to end in exactly the same spot you started, or as very nearly close to that as you could, within this range of steady running of that type of effort.
But not straining.
Not straining. So you have to be by the end still running just a good, comfortable, steady effort. It's strong, but it's still comfortable. Steady effort, and finish and as close to that same spot as you started, right? So then the feedback was obvious. If I finished way shorter in 60 minutes than where I should have, then I came back quite a bit faster than I went out. And so I should probably go out a little bit stronger, right? If I is the opposite, isn't it?
No, that made sense. I thought.
If I finish way past it, then I go faster on the way back. If I finish way short of it, then I went too slow on the way back.
Okay.
So I slowed down. Okay, so you get it. You get it more than I do as I'm trying to explain it. Okay, so this is the idea then. And you would use that to kind of gauge your sense of how much should I be exerting in the beginning stages to maintain that consistency in the latter stages. That's a really effective workout. Now, we don't necessarily recommend that for our runners very often. We will as needed.
Because it can be stressful.
Well, it can be stressful, and it kind of creates, again, more of these false expectations at times where we really just want you to try to give a good, comfortable, steady effort and not worry about outcomes and results so much.
Right. And again, like, I think going back to what I said about runners not wanting to fall off a pace once they start it, even if it's the wrong effort, we're just stubborn and we want to keep that. I think that can happen in an out and back scenario as well, where we're like, I'm just going to give it more effort so I can finish it and get it right.
Yeah. And so now the focus is on that contrived result, which has nothing to do with the goal of the workout. It's simply a way to gauge whether you are successful in your implementation of the workout. So I don't know how Lydiard got people to do that well, or if he similarly didn't necessarily use it as much.
Yeah, so maybe not all the time. Maybe it's just occasional.
Well, it was only ever occasional,
Okay.
A few times a season, maybe once at the beginning, once in the middle, once at the end or something. But the point being, that is a way, if you're trying to think about, okay, how can I better coerce myself to this desired result? because it's just a challenging thing. Very, like, we're talking years in practice before runners maybe have as strong a handle on this as they ought. And that's, personally, that's acceptable to me, that these things aren't something we just immediately do well right away.
Because we can see results even if we don't do it perfectly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We just pursue improvement. Remember how we always talk about, in terms of running, incremental growth is the key, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the same thing in terms of like the quality of training too. Incremental growth is great. And so that's one way that you might try to help contrive it a little bit more, with the understanding that that's not the way you should be trying to implement training in general all the time, but it can be helpful. So if that's your easy and your hard effort stuff, then it comes back ultimately to the big question, which was racing. And what we have to do as we talk about racing by effort and not by feel is we have to prepare ourselves via those things in training before we really feel are going to be capable of doing this well in races.
And we did talk about, with Steve Magnus's book, Do Hard Things, being able to interpret feelings too in a proper way, because sometimes when you feel something, it has nothing to do with your exertion. So being able to categorize them and label them, he talked about that being very important. So if I'm like groggy or like, I don't know, there's a lot of things that can make us feel like we're not going to have a good day or make us feel badly before we start a run, but being able to categorize them appropriately so we can have the proper exertion. So feelings are not bad. It's just we don't want to use them solely to help us gauge exertion.
That's right. It's a good piece of feedback, but it's a late piece of feedback. And it tells us something after we've already put in the work. And so that's where with races, that becomes especially difficult, because most of the time, if we feel the wrong way too soon, like we feel worse than we should early on, then we've already done the harm by that point. We've already overdone things. And so it's not to suggest that, I guess the principle here that I want to get across is train yourself first. Try to implement things in training that help grow this intuition, because when you're in a race, it's that much harder to do it well because you have so many other things involved, like race day excitement, race environment stuff. Remember all of the stuff. Steve Magnus was sharing it in one of his Science Digests, that the environment matters in terms of competition, performance potential, and things like that. And so we get in that race environment, and a lot of our great ideas that we had before the race just disappear somehow, vanish. And then we just do things, and they're not the things we meant to do, and yet we do them. So I am that way. As soon as I feel competitive, all my good plans go out the door.
I was like, what feelings?
So
like
I feel like there's... Thanks. I feel like there's 2 times, if I may say so, Andy, that I was able to shrug off the temptations of like race day competitiveness and implement the plan as planned. Like 2 times that were like especially successful, but also under high pressure. So one was Bayshore. Bayshore, I feel like, is the first time I've ever implemented a marathon plan the way that I desired to implement it in all of its specificity, I guess you could say. So that's one.
Or unspecific.
Yeah, sure.
Specificity.
But the other one, in fact, and this is where I've generated some of my preferences in terms of how I like to race. The other one was back in college, the National Championship Steeplechase.
Okay.
The race plan for that, shout out to Coach Q. The race plan that Q and I devised was to do the thing that you should never do. So I did the opposite of what we're talking about here. I ran as hard as I reasonably could for the first half of the race for 2 reasons. All right. The first is it was a hot day, and I knew that would wreck people if they tried to go with me. Now, that runs a high risk, right?
That you'll get
that
wrecked?
I'll wreck myself. So it was a very risky strategy, because Q was like, it's, it might not pan out, but I will say we did things in training to kind of try to prepare for that. So I had a decent sense of it. But the other side of it is I feel most comfortable, like most in control of myself, when I'm in the lead and not chasing after people.
Which is weird, because Bayshore you're chasing.
I know, because in Bayshore it's like I can't do that same thing in a marathon because I keep blowing up when I do. So I had to put myself in my most uncomfortable place in a race, which is far enough behind that it feels insurmountable, and yet I had to do that anyway. So these are interesting reflections, because when you look at your race experiences and what you're trying to accomplish, at the ultimate goal for all of us, when we're trying to perform, then there's one answer. And so if I want to achieve a positive performance result, then all I really am trying to do is run as fast, as strong, as fast as I possibly can on that day, because then I'm going to achieve the best possible result that I could. Whether or not I can achieve some time or some other thing, if I got everything out of my body that was possible, that's all you can ask. But it's really hard to do that consistently on purpose. Most of us, it happens by accident. Like I ran a pace, and it just so happens that pace was exactly the right thing for that day. It's very rare. So this is why we say this is the kind of thing that if I can attune myself well enough to this concept of exerting relative to my energy and the amount of distance left in the race, then I can achieve that best possible result far more consistently and reliably, but it's going to take time.
Is that what you have for us today, Zach? Or do you have any more notes?
Well, I've got plenty more to say, but I think that we should probably let it rest at the moment here and entertain your follow-up questions, because I know you're going to have them, which is, okay, so here's my situation, and here's some things I've tried. What would you say I should try to do this? Or you might have a question along the lines of, I don't agree with you, Zach, and I think that maybe there's another thought here. I would love for people to disagree with me, and we can address that as we go. That would just be fun, because I know.
Do that to email, not to social media.
Well, sure.
I don't know. Who reads all of
I don't know about the social media, but yes.
Email.
But in principle, these things ought to be more of a discussion, not just this coach somewhere at some point wrote this thing like Lydiard. Lydiard wrote these things, and so everyone should just do it. No, I think we should evaluate
it. Yeah.
And discuss it. Yeah, good. Mm-hmm. So send your questions to AtoZrunning.com/question, and we'll entertain them as best we can every month in our end of month episodes.
Next up, the world of running. As always, first up in the world of running, we have some A to Z runner shout outs. We have Hannah, who ran in the 1 in 5 relay. Erin, who won her trail race.
What?
At Yankee Springs Trail Race.
50K.
And she was second overall. But barely. She almost was first overall out of anyone crossing the finish line. So
in other words, she beat all the women and almost beat all the men.
Yeah.
Very well done, Erin.
Well done, Erin. Super impressive.
Speaking of impressive things, others running, Michaela, Allison, and Stephanie all ran a 5K, and with great results. Michaela was first, and Stephanie was second, and so that's kind of fun when our people are crossing the finish line after. It's cool. Good work, all. And Bill ran a half marathon, finished third overall on a brutally hot day, which is, it's hard to run anything in heat, but especially longer races like half marathons. So props to you, Bill, for gritting through it. And Spencer, on the same day in the same place, ran the 5K at the event and finished third as well in a PR time,
Woo-woo.
Which is just, it was hot. Running a personal best in anything, that's impressive. Well done to all of you.
First up for the world of running, as far as the larger world view is, Florence Diamond League. We continue on in this Diamond League trek, going from city to city all over the world, this time in Rome.
Are you no, it wasn't in Rome, it's in Florence, but it's the Rome Diamond League meet. They just have been doing it in Florence.
I'm confused.
Because there's a reason they can't do it in Rome, and unfortunately I don't remember what it is. But
I apologize for
it's in Florence at the moment. It'll be back in Rome.
It will be back in Rome at some point. It's still called the Rome Diamond League, so that's weird. All right. What's not weird is Faith Kipyegon.
Are you bursting at the seams right now? Are you just so excited?
The 1,500 meter run, but not just winning.
Oh, no.
Fulfilling her dream of breaking the world record.
New world record.
Woo!
What? Okay, Faith
cool.
Kipyegon has now done it all. She's won everything, pretty much many times, and broke the world record. She is now the undisputed greatest 1,500 meter runner of all time.
Yeah. Yes. So Faith Kipyegon ran 3:49.11.
That is so fast.
It's so fast.
It's the equivalent, by the way, of about a 4:06 mile. Full mile.
Okay.
So that's so fast.
It is so fast. So previously it was held by Gonzebe Dababa, and she ran that back in 2015, and she ran 3:50.07. So Faith Kipyegon is the first woman to ever go under the 3:50 mark. Her last lap was 58 seconds.
What?
So fast.
What?
It's crazy. It really is. I mean, I'm saying it and I'm like almost at a loss for words of the ways to describe how excited I am to see Faith Kipyegon do this. But there are more people in the race that did extraordinary things. Laura Muir of Great Britain and Jessica Hall of Australia tried to hang on for a while, and they still got records. Well, Jessica Hall did.
Yeah.
New Oceania and Australian record for Hall in 3:57. And she like crossing the finish line. You could see her excitement. That was really fun to see. Of course, such a fast time.
In fact, it was. And I should note that the two of them were not that far off Faith Kipyegon with a lap to go. But when somebody drops a 58-second last lap, nobody else is going to be close. Yeah. And so that's where almost all of the 8-second gap that Faith Kipyegon put on the two of them, nearly all of it, was in the last 400 meters.
It was so interesting because a lot of you probably have heard the clip now with Faith Kipyegon finishing in her final kick, and the announcer was saying that she was looking like she was fading a little bit, but she actually wasn't. She didn't fade.
He kept saying she looks like she's tiring. Well, that's only because she finally started to show anything other than calm confidence until the last 100 meters.
She pressed through the line, so that was a strong finish, and I did not see any fading.
So long as she is in that kind of form, she will remain unbeatable. No one will ever beat her in our current era until she has a less good day than that. That is exactly
I feel like now that you put that into the universe, there's going to be someone
nobody else can
challenge.
do it. She just did. She was on near world record pace and then ran a 58-second last lap.
Yeah.
Nobody else. Men can't even do that. That's like elite caliber men can't even do that. I don't even. That was just unbelievable. So yes, Andy, have you reached the pinnacle of fangirlism?
I love Faith Kipyegon. Many of you have heard me talk about how much I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of Faith Kipyegon. So it'll be exciting to see her continue on just with maybe some free. Well, she always has run, not in a sense that she didn't have control before, but like I feel like this could even liberate her to new levels too, now that she has accomplished all that she has set out to accomplish.
And I wanted to mention, I had to double check it because I couldn't remember exactly when this was. This is the first world record by a Kenyan in the 1500, by a Kenyan woman.
Really?
I believe. I can't.
Oh, there's a Kenyan.
I know, but that wasn't a world record.
Okay.
I can't know for sure from the list that I have in front of me, but as far as what I'm aware of historically, which is, I'm confident at least 1990 and on, and the Kenyan records weren't happening quite that soon at the time for women. So I think Faith Kipyegon's the first Kenyan to break the 1500 meter world record as well.
Wow.
Don't quote me on it though.
I mean, we could go back and dig a little.
Yeah. Okay. So how incredible was it? You can watch it, by the way. You can watch it. We've included the link. Well, we hope you can watch it. NBC Sports put just that race on YouTube, so you should be able to watch it there.
Yeah.
And the link that we've included is the full meet coverage, but it's not available everywhere in the world via YouTube, so it kind of depends on where you are.
Yeah.
Or if you have a VPN to watch it with that. Anyway, so that was fast, but there was other great things happening as well in Florence. Women's steeplechase was quite fast, and all like the big names were like clearly pushing the pace, like wanted a fast rabbit and all this stuff, and then started to struggle, and it was the youngsters yet again. The teenagers who dominated in the final stretches. And it ended up being, I think it was first and second. We're both teenagers. 9 flat for the win. And
Whoa.
2 national records a little bit further back in the race as well. So the women's steeplechase was moving and
And I
grooving.
think Emma Coburn, didn't she fall?
Yeah, Emma Coburn fell again. Everyone on the
feel bad
message
for
boards
her.
is like, is she done?
No,
she's not done.
falling is something that happens, but hopefully she
Apparently
gets...
to a lot of Americans lately.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we were trying to go so fast and compete at this level. I can see how that would happen.
Yep.
Men's 5,000. This was a really stacked race, wasn't it, Zach?
It might be the most stacked non-championship 5,000 ever. I'm not just going to make that claim, just throw it out there. Probably not ever, but certainly it was on that kind of a level. I don't have all of it here for you to be able to share every single detail, but I'm going to give you at least some of it because it's just worth understanding. So in this one race, we had, go pull up the extra thing here too. In this one race, we had some of all of the recent medalists in. So we had Selaman Barega, who's the Olympic gold medalist in like the 10,000 World Championships medal. He's from Ethiopia. We've got Yamif Kejelcha, also from Ethiopia. He's the current world record holder in the indoor mile, as well as he's got medals from World Indoor and Outdoor, and a couple other Ethiopian records. And then, no. Not Ethiopian records. Those are Kenenisa Bekele. Anyway, Mohamed, who has all the Canadian records in like everything, and is a 12:47 5,000 meter runner as well. Grant Fisher, who has like all the U.S. records in everything, and he's a 12:46 5,000. He's also multiple time top 5 finisher. And then Mo Katir from Spain, who holds all the Spanish national records, as well as some international medals in championships. And so basically you've got like all of the individual best athletes from every country in this one race, which is kind of cool. Luis Grijalva, who also holds the Guatemalan national records and everything, and was 4th in the World Championships. So he's got a top 5 finish. Stewie McSwain, who's got a bunch of the Australian stuff, although he's not in top form at the moment, but he was still in the race too. And so it goes. There's more. Joe Klecker was there. Woody Kincaid was there. I keep hitting the wrong buttons. Okay. I'm going to pull this up for you here to kind of give you the sense of, so here's what happened. This race was just weird. All right.
Weird.
It was weird. So it goes out, it's got rabbits and the wave
animals.
lights.
Okay. I'm just kidding.
goes out with its pacers and the wave lights and all of that. And it goes out fast. Like these guys were on like sub 12:50 pace. Most of them have run sub 12:50. So it was like not that big of a deal, you could say. But it was fast. All right. Really something. And then after the pacers drop, right at about the halfway point, it slows way down. Like no one wanted to continue the pace. And you could see so many guys like just frustrated. Like we were coming out here to run fast. Suddenly everyone just slows down. And then you get a couple of guys who kind of like push for a little bit and then back off because they don't want to do too much work because, it's a star-studded field. You're not going to run away from anyone in this kind of a field. And so this kind of yo-yo effect happens. It bunches up, it strings out. It bunches up, it strings out. This is like the worst possible circumstance for fast running. Like runners, especially distance runners, hate this kind of yo-yo racing. But yet that's what they were doing, right? Okay, so, and I wanted to continue mentioning. So who else was in that race? Joshua Cheptegei, the current world record holder in 5,000 and 10,000. He was in the race. Jacob Kropp, the Kenyan, who's just been storming through everything lately. And then Samuel Tefera, the previous world record holder for the indoor 1,500 meters. And Berihu Aragawi, who won the Diamond League a couple years ago. And so it goes. All right. So you get the idea.
I get
this
the idea.
was the race of races.
I get it, yeah.
All right, now. It gets to like 2 laps to go and things get wild. And these guys are the cream of the crop, world-class runners, and everyone is able to win this race. I'm not even kidding you. I think just about every single person in the field could have won that race with even almost a lap to go still. And so this giant crowd of guys is just accelerating, storming down the field. Joshua Cheptegei is running in like lane 4 for half of the the penultimate lap because he's just trying to get around these guys, but he can't because they're all just as fast as him, right? And so it just goes like that. And then you get to the last lap, and just a couple of guys were near the front, and it was like this became one of those races where if you had the right position, then you were gold. And if you didn't, you just couldn't quite get there because everyone was just as fast as you. So Mo Katir takes the victory in just this storming last lap, like 54 seconds in his last lap, wins by 0.03 of a second over Ethiopian Yamif Kejelcha, who's, by the way, one of the best kickers in the world. And so he outkicks him, which is crazy. And then Luis Grijalva runs a new Guatemalan national record, personal best, by like 10 seconds.
Wow.
Right?
I love to hear it.
This crazy kick. He outkicks Joshua Cheptegei. Like, the Joshua Cheptegei. So it's, just incredible race. I think Grijalva just like had this massive, what's that called when you breakthrough? Massive breakthrough race. That was something, right? And so then you've got these top three all running 12:52 within the same second of each other. And remember what I said, this was set up to be like a sub 12:50 race, and then it slowed a ton. They still ended up running 12:52 because these guys are just crazy, so crazy. Woody Kincaid, who was in like 13th with a lap to go and kind of like off the pack, ends up finishing 6th. With, by the way, the fastest last lap of everyone in the field. He matched Mo Katir's final lap, but he was just too far back. Otherwise, he would have been the guy winning that race if he would have been up there.
Well, Woody Kincaid is known for his kick,
I know, which is why the dude's got to get in the race before the last lap so he can win it. So Woody Kincaid, who is first among the Americans in that elite American group. Joe Klecker was right behind him. Woody Kincaid, a PR, 12:54. Joe Klecker, a PR. Well, that's an outdoor PR for Woody Kincaid. He's run faster indoors. But an outdoor PR for Joe Klecker in 12:55. And then it was Grant Fisher, who was the third American and yet ran 12:56. To say you're the third American across the line. So, by the way, the first time we've ever had 3 Americans run under 13 in one race.
Really? Okay, that's exciting.
It's
Good
exciting,
times.
right? And so it was amazing, and you got to watch it. You have to watch it. It was so good. How many guys ran under 13 in one race? 13.
Wow.
Amazing.
That's an easy number to remember.
Yeah, right? 13 sub 13.
Under 13.
It's good. So I am almost as excited about that race as I was about the women's 1500 when Faith Kipyegon. I mean, not really, not even close, but it was an exciting one.
That is an exciting race, absolutely. Yeah. Well, there's another event that was going on with world-class talent as well. Not all of the world-class talent went to the Diamond League.
In fact, there's even more still out there somewhere. Yeah.
What was the event, Zach?
Well, okay, so the Hengelo FPK Games in the Netherlands is a kind of like it's kind of become a staple for Sifan Hassan because she's the Netherlands like star child, but also it's been attracting a lot of international talent as one of the most competitive 10,000 meter races in the world for women specifically on the track, and so it's been a really a great one to watch lately. Well, this year did not disappoint. Now, before we share, remember Sifan Hassan just ran the London Marathon.
And won it.
In fact, 6 weeks ago.
In her debut. Okay?
In her first ever marathon. And she's like, yeah, I'm really just training for the track though. Well, apparently she was not at all overstating rather what she's doing, because she comes back 6 weeks later, runs the double 10,000 meter and the next day 1,500 meter. So she did 2 races in one weekend, won them both, which isn't terribly surprising. But she was still
impressive.
Beating world-class runners. More specifically, how fast she ran 6 weeks after a marathon. She won the 10,000 in 29:37.
She's a fast lady.
I mean, there's only like 5 people who have run faster than that ever. She's one of them. She's run 30 seconds faster than that, sure. But that's really moving. Mm-hmm. And it should be noted that in second place, 10 seconds behind her, was Grace Loibach Nawouna from Kenya, who at 19 years of age ran her first 10,000 meter in the 8th fastest time all time, 29:47.
Okay, Grace, we see you.
So note that and watch her. That's definitely going to be something to continue to see. And so Sifan Hassan, didn't actually. She had to like really seriously put herself out there and race to even just win this one. Well, she comes back the next day and runs a 1,500, which is something Sifan Hassan is familiar with doing, and wins the 1,500 also in a blazing fast at 3:58, which isn't like, we're talking about Faith Kipyegon running 3:49. But still, 3:58 the day after a 29:30 something 10,000.
6 weeks after a marathon.
6 weeks after winning London Marathon. Yeah, that's something. Nelly Chepchirchir was in second from Kenya in 3:58. They were very close together, under a second. And so highly contested race. And for her, it was a 5-second PR as well.
That's huge.
That is very big in the
Wow.
1500. Yeah, so just exciting things on the track.
So Nelly is a youngster. We're going to talk about more fast youngsters in this section. At the Hoka Festival of Miles, 4 boys ran sub 4 in one race. So that's 20 total in the U.S. now.
Yeah, think about that a second. 20 ever boys have run under 4 minutes in the mile, and 4 did it in one race here.
That's a large percentage.
That's amazing. That is a lot. In fact, it's 1 of 5. What is that? 20%. Okay, so that was incredible. Simeon Birnbaum, first among greats in this one, which he's familiar with doing. He's been winning a lot of really notable races lately. And so he had a very strong finish to win 3:57, and then was asked in the post-race interview, so, even though you guys were trying to run a little bit faster than that, in fact, they had declared ahead of time that they were going to go for Alan Webb's national high school record of 3:53. And clearly they did not get it. So Birnbaum was asked, well, you still ran a PR, so you got to be happy with that at least, because it was a PR for him and very fast. And Birnbaum turns to the guy and replies, and he's like, no, I'm not happy with that. He said, we came out here to do something and we didn't do it. I'm like, oh man, this dude is serious.
He's very serious.
Cool. But he wasn't like disappointed, like upset with himself. He was just like, no, we missed the target.
Let's just all be really impressed right now. Because Alan Webb is amazing.
Right?
Like all of these guys who are chasing after his time in so many years. How many years has it been now? So
I
many
couldn't
years.
recall off the top of my head. 20?
Well, we were in high school when he had the record.
Yeah.
So
it was like 20, 19 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's just be impressed for a moment at how fast Alan Webb did the mile without super shoes.
Yeah, I mean, it should be noted in high school he ran 3:53, and then later on, only several years later, broke the American record in 3:46.9. So, I mean, basically 6 seconds between his high school and all-time American records. That is not an easy record to break. So these guys coming out, and they made a good effort after it. They had the pacers, the wave lights, but it was beyond them this time around.
Another youngster, super youngster that we want to talk about.
So we're just going to go younger.
Middle schooler.
14.
U14. She's under 14.
Yes,
Sophia
13,
Rodriguez broke the world U14 record for the 5K at the John Hay Distance Festival. She ran a time of 16:22.
What?
16:22.
No. She's 13 years old.
I know. She's a middle
She's
school
still a kid.
runner. Yeah.
She's like a child still.
It's amazing.
Oh, my
and then,
goodness.
get this. She actually flew the day before.
Like she has wings too?
Yes. Well, it would seem so. But no, the day before, Rodriguez posted a time of 4:50 in the full mile at a different meet.
Why not?
Why not?
Because you can do that when you're like that.
So fast. So she's not just recently becoming good. She's been good for a while. In May, she won a middle school championship in the 3,200 meter and was U.S. number 35 with a time of 10:17. So that's really fast.
Wait, so that's US 35 like for
It must be
all
all
prep?
because 10:17. It wouldn't be 35 for middle schoolers, that's for sure.
Well, because the next stat tells it all. She set a 2-mile world age group record indoors.
Okay, yep. Her time for indoor for the 2 mile was 10:20.68 for 2 miles. So world age group record. That is so
she's got the
fast.
world U14 5K and the world U14 indoor 2-mile.
That's amazing. So Sophia Rodriguez.
Another
She's
one
coming-
to watch.
She's coming for these high school records too shortly. So speaking of which,
Speaking of high school records, Addie Wiley, remember we mentioned her earlier. She was in West Michigan last summer to set the girls 1,600 meter U.S. high school record. Now, at 19 years of age and finishing her freshman year of college at Huntington, which so many people have just wondered, like, what was that choice? Because so Huntington is an NAIA school, not NCAA division school, which means it's small school division, essentially. And she could have gone anywhere she wanted for free. So it's just a very strange move.
We love the NAIA.
Not that we have any problem with it.
So
we, in fact, ran against Huntington quite a bit.
Yeah.
But people are just like, just don't understand the move. And I don't know that I have any understanding or knowledge. You should ask her. I'm sure she's expressed it in interviews at times. But the point being, she's like sweeping the NAIA by storm, just breaking all the records, doing all the things, winning every race. What was she won 7 races in indoor nationals?
Oh my word!
Nah, I'm exaggerating.
Oh,
but point being, she just ran a 1,500 meter race at the Music City Distance Track Festival in a time of 4:03:22. 4:03
for the
at
win.
19 years of age for the
in
win.
a pro field.
That is super duper fast.
Super duper.
So just continues to, and so that's one of the things is like, is she going to be able to continue improving? And when you have youngsters running fast, you always wonder about that. Well, she's doing it.
She's doing it. 61.3 final lap.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm.
Where's Faith Kipyegon? Should see them race. All right, so that's fun and that's exciting. She's got NAI records as mentioned. She just won the double 800, 1500 at NAI Nationals. It was like a week ago. So there's a lot of good stuff going on there. Keep watching Addie Wiley. See what else she does next. Tyrone Gorsey is the next and last one we'll share at the moment of the youngster accomplishments recently. So Tyrone Gorsey is a high school senior and decided to attempt a very obscure high school record because high schoolers just don't do this very much. The 10,000 meter record. So again, not an event high schoolers are likely to even try because what high schooler wants to run 10,000 meters hard?
They're all complaining about running the 2 miles. So it's amazing when someone wants to run the 10,000.
Well, he's done it before. He did it last year and he ran strong. And this year he's thinking, I'm going to try to go for that record now. The record, by the way, is 28:32 from 1976.
Okay, that's a long-standing record.
That is, 47 years. That is the longest standing high school record, at least for the boys. I guess I haven't compared that against the girls' records. But more specifically, it's the only one not broken in the modern era. And so you got to wonder, like, how hard is that? Because, like, Galen Rupp hasn't done that. I mean, like, yeah, okay. So here it is. Rudy Chapa set that record in 1976 and happens to live in the city where this race was occurring. So the meet director thought, I'm going to reach out to this guy. So he gives him a call. I don't know how. Maybe he has his number on speed dial and says, hey, Rudy, you should come out and watch. This kid's going to go for your record. Well, it turns out he's out of town. He can't do it. But he goes, I'll do you one better. He mailed the kid the singlet that he wore in 1976 when he set the record. So Tyrone Gorsey is running in this 47-year-old singlet. It was so cool. And I guess apparently when he got it, he was like, I can't do that. I can't wear this guy. Like, this guy set the record in this thing. It's like his 47-year-old shirt. I can't do that. Well, then he decided, I got to do it. So he did. And he ran fast. But he did not break the record, unfortunately.
Still a cool experience.
However, here's what he did. Tyrone Gorsey ran 29 minutes flat. Now, that amounts to the 3rd fastest all-time by a high schooler. And, in fact, if Rudy Chapa holds the record from 1976, Eric Hulst is the 2nd fastest, who also ran his time in 1976.
What?
28:55. So Gorsey ran only 5 seconds shy of the next fastest time, but the fastest time by a high schooler in 47 years.
Okay. He's got to feel good about that, right?
You got to feel good about that.
Well, you'd hope, but the other guy said no, he wasn't happy. But.
Well, that was Birnbaum. I don't know. Gorsey might feel differently.
I know.
But this is another kid to watch because we got to say he's got the number 4 all-time in the 3,000 meters at 8:04 for a high schooler and the number 6 all-time in the 5,000 meters at 13:47. So between number 3 and the 10, number 4 and the 3, he's going to go places. This kid's just doing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was exciting. Now I'm feeling super pumped up.
We're ready to race right now.
Ready to go. Speaking of which, if you have questions about racing, training, any of the things that relate to running, send them to us. We love to hear them.
We do love to hear them. Just go to AtoZrunning.com/question.
Thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.